The sun had just set over the horizon as John drove his car down the winding road that led to the remote town of Ravens Peak. He was on his way to visit an old friend who lived there. As he drove deeper into the woods, the road became increasingly narrow and the trees started to close in around him, making him feel claustrophobic. Finally, John arrived at Ravens Peak. The town was small and looked deserted, with no signs of life. He parked his car in front of his friend's house and knocked on the door. There was no answer. John tried the doorknob and found it unlocked, so he pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Hello? Is anyone here?" he called out. Silence greeted him. John started to explore the house, looking for his friend. As he walked through the rooms, he noticed that the furniture was covered in dust and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The house looked like it had been abandoned for years. Suddenly, John heard a noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone or something was scratching at the door. He cautiously made his way to the front door and opened it. "Hello? Who's there?" John called out. No one answered. He stepped outside and looked around. The town was eerily quiet. Suddenly, John saw movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned to look and saw a creature lurking in the shadows. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and its teeth were razor sharp. John stumbled backward in horror. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Suddenly, the creature lunged at him. John ran back inside the house and slammed the door shut. He locked it and leaned against it, trying to catch his breath. "What the hell is going on here?" John muttered to himself. As he listened, he heard more noises coming from outside. It sounded like there were dozens of creatures scratching and clawing at the door, trying to get in. John knew he had to get out of there. He searched for a window he could climb out of and spotted one in the kitchen. He made his way to the window, but as he was about to climb out, he heard a voice behind him. "Where do you think you're going?" the voice asked. John spun around and saw a man standing in the doorway. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and piercing eyes. "Who are you?" John demanded. "I'm the mayor of Ravens Peak," the man replied. "And you're not going anywhere." John backed away from the man, but he advanced on him, his eyes glinting with malice. "You're not welcome here," the mayor hissed. "This town belongs to the monsters now. And soon, you'll belong to them too." John turned and ran for the door, but the mayor was too quick for him. He tackled John and dragged him back inside the house. John struggled against him, but the mayor was too strong. "You can't fight them," the mayor said. "They're too powerful. You might as well give up." John's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that he was trapped in Ravens Peak, with no way out. He was surrounded by monsters, and the only person who could help him was the very man who had captured him. He was doomed. John felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had never felt so helpless before. "What do you want from me?" John asked, his voice shaking with fear. The mayor grinned wickedly. "We want your blood," he said. "The monsters need it to survive. And we're running out of victims." John's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. He knew he couldn't let the monsters get him. He had to find a way to escape. Suddenly, he remembered the window in the kitchen. "You're not going to get my blood," John said, his voice rising with determination. "I'll fight you with everything I've got." The mayor laughed. "You're a fool. You can't defeat us." John lunged at the mayor, hoping to catch him off guard. But the mayor was too quick. He dodged John's attack and grabbed him by the throat, squeezing until John's vision started to blur. "Enough of this," the mayor growled. "It's time for you to meet the monsters." He dragged John out of the house and into the street. A crowd of monsters had gathered, their eyes glowing in the darkness. They hissed and growled as the mayor approached with John in tow. "Here's your next victim," the mayor announced. John struggled against the mayor's grip, but it was no use. He was surrounded by monsters, with no hope of escape. Suddenly, he heard a sound in the distance. It was the sound of a car engine. The monsters looked up, their attention drawn to the noise. John saw his chance and broke free from the mayor's grip. He sprinted towards the car, hoping to make it before the monsters caught him. As he reached the car, he fumbled with the keys, trying to get the door open. The monsters were closing in on him, their claws outstretched. Finally, he managed to unlock the door and jump inside. He started the car and slammed on the gas, plowing through the crowd of monsters. They hissed and snarled, but John didn't stop until he was out of Ravens Peak. As he drove away, John looked in the rearview mirror and saw the town disappearing in the distance. He knew he would never forget the horrors he had witnessed there, but he also knew he would never go back. From that day on, John was haunted by nightmares of the monsters of Raven's Peak, but he also felt a sense of relief that he had escaped with his life. As John walked away from Raven's Peak, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had stopped the monsters and had given the people of the town a chance to start fresh. As he walked down the dirt road, he heard someone calling his name. He turned around and saw a young woman running towards him. "John. John. Wait up," she yelled. John recognized her as one of the former monsters he had cured. She had been a victim of the plant serum, just like the others. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for saving us." John smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." The woman hugged him tightly, and John felt a sense of warmth and compassion that he had never experienced before. "Will you stay with us?" she asked. "We need someone like you to help us rebuild." John considered her offer. He had nowhere else to go, and he had grown attached to the people of Raven's Peak. "I'll stay," he said, smiling. "But only if you promise to help me rebuild my car." The woman laughed, and they walked back to Raven's Peak together, ready to start a new chapter in their lives. Over the following weeks, John settled into life in Raven's Peak. He helped the townspeople rebuild their homes and businesses, and he even became friends with some of the former monsters he had cured. One day, as John was walking through town, he noticed a group of people gathered in the town square. They were all looking up at the sky, murmuring in awe. Curious, John followed their gaze and saw a flock of birds flying in the distance. But these weren't just any birds, they were enormous, with wingspans wider than John's arms could reach. Suddenly, one of the birds swooped down and grabbed a young boy from the crowd. The people screamed and scattered, but John didn't hesitate. He ran towards the bird, determined to save the boy. The bird was powerful, and John struggled to keep up. But he was fueled by a newfound sense of purpose, a desire to protect the people he had grown to love. Finally, he managed to grab onto the bird's leg and began to climb up its feathers. The bird screeched and flapped its wings, trying to shake John off. But John held on tight. He climbed higher and higher, until he was face to face with the bird. He could see the terror in the boy's eyes, and he knew he had to act fast. With a surge of strength, John punched the bird in the face, causing it to drop the boy. John caught the boy and held him tight as they plummeted towards the ground. They landed in a heap, but both were miraculously unharmed. The people of Raven's Peak rushed to their side, thanking John for his bravery. But as they celebrated, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. He had defeated the monsters, but it seemed that Raven's Peak was still plagued by strange and dangerous creatures. He knew that he would have to stay in Raven's Peak and continue to protect the people from whatever dangers lay ahead. And he was ready for whatever came his way. As John continued to explore the area surrounding Raven's Peak, he discovered that the plant serum was not the only thing the settlers had been experimenting with. They had also been tampering with the local wildlife, creating new and dangerous species that roamed the woods. Determined to protect the people of Raven's Peak, John began to train himself in combat and survival skills. He spent his days exploring the woods and tracking down the creatures that threatened the town. One day, as he was returning from a hunt, he saw smoke rising from the direction of Raven's Peak. His heart raced as he ran towards the town, fearing the worst. As he reached the outskirts of town, he saw that the entire area had been engulfed in flames. The people of Raven's Peak were scattered and panicked, trying to put out the fires and rescue those who were trapped. John knew that he had to act fast. He pulled out his makeshift weapons and charged towards the flames, determined to save as many people as he could. As he ran, he saw one of the new creatures that the settlers had created. It was larger than any of the monsters he had faced before, with razor-sharp teeth and glowing eyes. Without hesitation, John charged towards the creature, dodging its attacks and striking back with his weapons. He could feel his strength waning, but he refused to give up. Finally, he delivered a decisive blow, and the creature fell to the ground, dead. But John knew that there were more creatures like it out there, and he had to keep fighting. For hours, John battled the creatures and helped the people of Raven's Peak escape the flames. By the time the fires had been extinguished, John was exhausted and covered in wounds. But he had saved the town, and the people of Raven's Peak hailed him as a hero. They gathered around him, offering him food and water and thanking him for his bravery. John smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction that he had never experienced before. He had found a purpose in Raven's Peak, a reason to keep fighting and protecting those who were in need. And as he looked out at the people he had saved, he knew that he would never leave Raven's Peak. It was his home now, and he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As John continued to live in Raven's Peak, he became even more skilled in combat and survival. He trained the townspeople to defend themselves, and together they worked to rebuild their town stronger and safer than ever before. But despite their efforts, Raven's Peak continued to be a target for those who sought to exploit its secrets. There were those who coveted the settlers' knowledge of the plant serum and the creatures they had created, and they were willing to do whatever it took to obtain it. One night, as John was keeping watch over the town, he heard a noise coming from the edge of the woods. He tensed, ready for whatever danger might be lurking. Suddenly, a group of armed men burst into the town, wielding guns and knives. They shouted demands for the plant serum and threatened to kill anyone who stood in their way. John knew that he had to act fast. He rallied the townspeople, and they armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find. The battle was fierce and brutal. John fought with all his might, taking down one attacker after another. He could feel the exhaustion setting in, but he refused to give up. Finally, after what felt like hours, the attackers were defeated. They lay strewn across the town square, their weapons scattered. John looked around, panting and covered in sweat. He had never faced such a threat before, and he knew that there would be more to come. But he was determined to protect Raven's Peak, no matter what. He looked out at the people he had saved, and he knew that he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. As the townspeople gathered around him, offering their thanks and congratulations, John felt a sense of pride and purpose that he had never known before. Raven's Peak was his home now, and he was ready to defend it with his life. As the night drew to a close, John watched as the townspeople settled back into their homes, feeling safe and protected. He knew that there would always be threats to Raven's Peak, but he was ready for them. He turned to leave, but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. It was the town's mayor, a grizzled old man who had seen his fair share of danger. "John," the mayor said, his voice gruff but kind. "You've done more for this town than we ever could have asked. You're a hero to us all." John smiled, feeling a sense of warmth spread through him. "Thank you," he said. "But I'm just doing what needs to be done." The mayor nodded. "I know. But you're more than just a protector, John. You're a part of this town. And we wouldn't be here without you." John felt a lump form in his throat. He had never felt so appreciated before. "Thank you," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. The mayor patted him on the back. "Get some rest, son. We've got a big day tomorrow, rebuilding and all that. But know that we're all grateful for what you've done." John watched as the mayor walked away, feeling a sense of belonging that he had never known before. Raven's Peak was his home now, and he was ready to defend it with everything he had. He turned and walked towards his own home, feeling a sense of peace settling over him. As he lay down to rest, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was ready for them. He was the protector of Raven's Peak, and he wouldn't have it any other way.